That's fantastic news.
MTG Basics. Keep it basic.
Hey everyone, I'm Jonah, and I'm joined by
Evan. I go by Freedom Waffle Online.
and we're here for another episode of Nameless cEDH podcast. Today we're talking about Evan's twist on the Kinnan List, the traditional Kinnan List that's been switched up recently since the ban, and you've had a lot of success on it. So we're going to go through and review the list and what's working and the changes that you've made. So
It's deck tech time.
deck tech time. Let's get into it.
I just wanted to use that voice.
Yeah, I think it was necessary to get into that.
Cool. So let's pull up the list here. I think a good place to start with this list is kind of talk about the overall game plan.
Yeah.
It's changed a lot from traditional Kinnan. I mean, you know, we still have, of course, a lot of the same tools. As you can see, we're still on the Basalt plan with lots of tutors to go infinite, right? Kinnan is, of course, a 2-card combo with Basalt Monolith. Kinnan is just such a powerful card. But this list is focused on using the mana advantage of Kinnan in order to be able to cast more spells by drawing more cards with Rhystic clones. So we're basically trying to get a draw engine into play always. We're less focused on flipping Kinnan, but once we have a draw engine in play, we want to have higher card quality so that when we draw more of these cards, we can cast them and basically outgrind our opponents by having just the ability to cast more of the cards that we draw. If everyone's drawing, their whole deck in a game with Rhystic Study, we think that we can cast more of them because we just have more mana.
So instead of using the mana advantage to flip out creatures, we're using the mana advantage to just draw cards and then spend the mana on the cards that we're choosing to play at that moment in time.
Yep, absolutely. And honestly, just a good way to look at this is you can glance at the creatures. We still have a ton, right? There's a lot of utility creatures in this list. But as far as like these big game-winning creatures, there's only about 6, right? We have Tidespot Tyrant and Hullbreaker Horror, which are infinite mana combos. You can cast 2 of your rocks infinite times, a Mox Amber and a Mox Opal, for example, to make infinite mana of each color, and then activate Kinnan to draw your deck. Yep. We also have Nyx Bloom Ancient, which just goes crazy. It's a combo with Grim Monolith, so that's a backup win con to make infinite colorless mana. But you can also, just use that extra mana advantage, even when you're not infinite, to just cast tons of spells and win the game and whatever.
So many times flipping into an Nyx Bloom pretty much says I win, even if you don't have an infinite out. Just
exactly,
you're making so much mana at that point that you get there.
Yeah, and we're basically just like all these creatures that we're talking about are these, really powerful effects that are not like we're happy to cast later in the game or flip into, but we're less focused on like trying to flip into them unless we have already overwhelming advantage. So sometimes we can get a Nyx Bloom into play and we just manually make so much mana by tapping a Cradle for like 27 or something to just be able to get more and more advantage and win the game. And Neza Hall and Con Sphinx, of course, are still in the deck because the goal of the deck is to draw cards. A 7-mana Mystic Remora is still Mystic Remora.
Still Mystic Remora.
It's Rhystic Study and Mystic Remora are basically like what this deck is built on. But some of these big flips do a great job of mimicking that. Consecrated Sphinx as well. And of course, Seedborn Muse, even if we don't have as many flips, if we're flipping a ton, we're gonna hit some good things.
Yep.
And so I would say the rest of these creatures are just utility creatures. We're happy to flip into them. One of a recent printing that has made this deck way more powerful is Enduring Vitality. And so I think that, while we don't want to flip, sometimes we just have to. Like sometimes we're going to be in these game plans where, we just got stopped, whatever, our draw engine got countered or removed, and we have to flip. And the thing about Enduring Vitality is the more you flip, it doesn't matter what the creature is. It can be an Elvish Spirit Guide. It's still going to ramp you. Yes. So we often are tutoring for Enduring Vitality early game in order to get our mana online and just keep ramping our mana. Even a Mockingbird that copies nothing is still really good with Enduring Vitality, especially because Valley Floodcaller untaps itself and other birds.
Yeah,
and
can you go into that a little bit on the Valley Floodcaller? Just the value with what that brings to this deck.
It's incredible. Yeah.
Besides being flash speed.
Well, I think it's like the fact that it does both is so important. Like in this meta, what this deck is tech towards is, of course, like we said, like not only our deck having a Rhystic Study in play, but others too. And so the more cards people are drawing, the more spells are being cast, which makes you draw more cards, right? So it just it gets exponential, right? And so what ends up happening is we want to find our window to win the game, and it's not always on our turn, right? And so there's, you might just someone might be going for a win because that's their best window. And the next player to untap is going to win the game no matter who it is, unless someone can win first, right?
Yep.
And so having flash enablers basically allows you to beat that turn order simulator, if you will, after whoever goes for the win. But with Valley Floodcaller specifically, in addition to making all your spells, non-creature spells, flash speed, it also untaps all your birds, frogs, otters, and rats whenever you cast a non-creature spell. And that's insane when you have a Birds of Paradise, a Mockingbird, because even if you copy something, it's a bird, a Floodcaller itself, because it's an otter, and an Enduring Vitality that makes these tap for mana. So whenever if our Mox Opal, if we cast a Mox Opal and we're even just untapping a Birds of Paradise, not only does our Opal tap for 2 because of Kinnan's mana advantage, our Birds of Paradise also taps for 2. So we've cast a 0 mana spell to make 4 mana. That's incredible. In any other deck, they would just be, people play Burgi, well, for the backside as well, Horn of Harnfell, but they play Burgi to, make an additional mana whenever you cast a spell. We're making 4 of any color whenever we cast a non-creature. So this combo is like not an infinite combo, but
I've done this before where I'm in a counter war. Stopping someone's win, and they don't realize I'm netting mana by casting these free spells. And I'm just waiting to go over the top when they run out of interaction. And I'm netting mana every single time this happens.
And once you have mana, if you already have cards, a lot of times the issue is mana, right? You run out of mana, you just can't cast more interaction pieces. And what we can do with the Floodcaller is go over the top by making that mana with counterspells, but also just casting WinCon. We can cast a Transmute Artifact at instant speed. Transmute Artifact wins the game because it'll get Basalt Monolith and go infinite, but it also ritualed us. So we can also cast, a Finale of Devastation, or we can also just cast Basalt Monolith. We can cast all kinds of things in response that makes us mana and allows us to keep going without even using our counterspells. And then we can use our counterspells to back up the spell that really matters.
So that's why getting Enduring Vitality out is so important, is because it just ramps us so much early in the game, middle of the game, late in the game. And it rarely ever gets countered. Anytime that
creatures are hard to counter.
Even a Finale of Devastation. If I just state I'm getting an Enduring Vitality, it ramps us, but it doesn't win us the game immediately. And so a lot of the times people just pass on it. And it's just such good value because after that point, you can grind people out.
Right. Well, and I think that's the Rog Thras conundrum, is that you can't counter these value pieces, because if you counter the value pieces, you're going to die to the ad nauseum or the necropotence that comes next, right? You have to wait till this critical point of interaction rather than just using your most important counterspell to slow them down. And so I don't think you really should be countering an Enduring Vitality in a lot of cases, because your counterspells are so important, right? Unless you've already drawn so many cards, right? There's times when that's not true. With anything in Magic, there's going to be exceptions, but I think in general, you need to let people develop so that you're not losing to the combo and waiting for your window to win with backup, or waiting to stop them so that you can win after, etc.
Yep, absolutely. So yeah, it definitely helps. Just draw a bunch of cards, get a bunch of mana, and then in a couple of turns, they don't even realize how far ahead this card has gotten us.
So I think maybe before we go into more of these creatures, maybe let's take a little step back and just look at this game plan a little more. I think a really good list to compare this to is Wounded Satellites, Grind Them into Dust. This has been one of the, premier Kinnan lists that has been around for a long time. A lot of people play this list.
Is what I started playing Kinnan on before I switched to your list.
Max
had a lot of success on it.
Very good brewer, and this has been just the go-to for a long time. And I think that No Bad Cards Kinnan has been able to really focus more on this Rhystic Study meta after the bans of Dockside and Mana Crypt, etc. And I think that now that everyone is not able to win as quickly, we are able to just capitalize on that a lot better. But let's look at the differences between these. Kinnan No Bad Cards is 19 cards different from the Grind Them into Dust list. And this is the cards that Wounded Satellite is running that we aren't. And you can see that there's definitely a variety of things. And there's a couple things that stand out. First off, there's creatures that are utility creatures or stacks pieces or interaction pieces, but they don't necessarily advance your own game, right? These creatures are very powerful, right? But we are not focused on, if we're drawing a bunch of cards, we don't want these stuck in our hand. That's really the key here, is that if we look at all of these spells, almost all of these spells, they all are more expensive than a lot of these spells, right? They're harder to cast, so they're going to be better in a slower game or a low resources game. You can call it a small game when people are not drawing a lot of cards. Versus when we are drawing a lot of cards, we have extra free interaction. We have a misdirection. We just have extra 1 mana interaction as opposed to like 2-mana interaction.
It's Rhystic Study Hell right now.
Exactly.
So how do you beat Rhystic Study Hell?
You cast more spells. You have more free spells. You make more mana, so that you can capitalize.
And we draw more cards.
Exactly.
Yep.
Well, yeah. Rhystic Study Hell. Everyone's drawing more cards. We have to be able to beat that.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, and so again, these big creatures: Wander Archaic, Void Winnower, Thorn Mammoth, Glenalendra. Consider it kind of a big creature, right? Like, I want to be spending 1 mana on a counterspell, not 5 in that first turn cycle.
Yeah.
These creatures here, they're just antithetical to our plan. We want to be able to cast all these spells and not have cards stuck on our hand rather than spin into them. We have these big cards we can spin into, right? We have still these 6 really important creatures, and sometimes clones are incredible to spin into as well, or an Enduring Vitality. Like, some of these smaller creatures are good to spin into as well, but they're castable, right? And a lot of these creatures, it's like, well, Hullbreaker Horror and Tidespot Tyrant are win cons, but the rest of these, we can just ramp and cast these. They're not going to really be stuck in our hand because they're a game plan, right?
Yes.
Like, I don't always want to be, first off, Void Winnower is more mana than anything else in our deck, and it's just hard to ramp into that and cast it and expect to live because the Swords to Plowshares beats it, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the idea here.
So from playing this deck for so long, on some of these creatures, and flipping into, like, if you go back to the creatures that are different, the Void Winnower, for example, the things that we're flipping into for the most part, you can do with very little resources or a board state, they'll advance your gameplay. A Void Winnower, as it shuts down what opponents can do on their side of the board, you become the threat sometimes when you don't want to be. Like, I'm doing a Kinnan flip. I am hoping to hit something like Consecrated Sphinx or something to draw me cards. And instead, I've shut down the board and I've gotten myself into a place where I'm now the threat.
It's a 3v1.
And it's a 3v1. And I wasn't ready for that yet. The Thorn Mammoth is great. It's just a lot of mana. And so it's removal, essentially. And so there's things that you can play that are removal as well. Just things like that in this deck are different. And the Trinisphere, I actually never played this list with the Trinisphere. I know Max greatly likes it and has convinced others to try it for a while, but I just never found myself in a place where I felt comfortable casting a Trinisphere and ensuring that I was going to be the one that was ahead the entire time.
And like, this can be game winning if you get it out really early. Like, that's for sure. My issues with it, well, first off, we're trying to draw cards and cast the spells. This doesn't let you do that, right? We want the Kinnan No Bad Cards wants a big game, not a small game. Trinisphere is going to thrive off of a small game because that means that one Kinnan flip in a turn cycle is, I mean, if that's what you want to be doing, shutting off spells is great, right?
Yep.
But the other issue with Trinisphere right now is the Gaia's Cradle meta. Gaia's Cradle, it makes a lot of mana, and they aren't always even casting a lot of spells. Sometimes they're just, casting a couple crucial spells and then spinning with Thrasios until they win the game. Or even if you slow them down for a turn, they're still doing more than anybody else.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases, right? And so it's just not what we want to be doing. Yeah. Yep. But of course, again, in a small game, when you want to be flipping, it is a powerful card for sure.
Yeah. Yep. A lot of that. And then I think the only thing in this list, all of these cards are great, and you can run these in the list. I think I would say that the 81 cards that are not listed here are probably the core Kinnan cards.
Yes.
If you want to modify your Kinnan deck at all, I would say changing the 19 cards that are listed here is the difference.
Yeah.
Are probably the cards that you want to play with to some degree. And so that's kind of where, like, the meat and potatoes of the deck is in 80 cards, 81 if you count Kinnan below. And so it's really these 19 cards that are going to be different.
We're both winning the game in the same exact way most of the time. So, well, and so let's take a look at the cards that the Grind Them into Dust list is not running. So again, we can see, we talked about Misdirection a little bit. The latest addition to the deck is Disrupting Shoal. This is basically, well, so it says, because a lot of people probably don't know what this card is unless they played Modern Belcher, but you may exile a blue card from your hand with converted mana cost X from your hand rather than paying this spell's mana cost. Counter target spell if its converted mana cost is X, right? So it's a lot more specific than a Force of Will, but if you have the right mana costed blue card, it's a Force of Will, right? And so the idea here is that, again, once we get into these really big games where people are drawing their decks, which consistently happens in games that I see, not always their whole deck, but a lot of cards. You just need to have free interaction. Even if we're making more mana, we still need to be able to interact for free, because sometimes you just have to tap low and you run out of mana because you developed on your turn, maybe to get your Ristic Study in play in the first place, right? Or whatever you are drawing cards from. And so having extra free mana free counter spells is crucial to the list.
Absolutely. Yeah, I have not gotten a chance to test the Disrupting Shoal, but the misdirection has been huge.
Mhm.
And I would also comment on how many more blue cards are in your list than the Grind Them into Dust. And that does give the advantage to run the Disrupting Shoal and the misdirection and those types of cards.
Right. And we can look down here and we can see that 41 out of 75 non-land cards are blue.
Yep.
That's a lot. We have cards to pitch as long as we're drawing cards, right? Again, you need to be drawing cards, right? That's crucial to this.
Yes.
And I will point out one more thing with Shoal quickly. So if we look at the mana values of the deck, part of the theory with adding Disrupting Shoal is that a lot of the cards we want to be countering are 2 and 3 drops. So I want to be countering Orcish Bowmasters. I want to be countering Grand Abolishers. Creatures are hard to counter. Creature silence effects are really dangerous and hard for us to deal with, right? So a Disrupting Shoal, I mean, there's a lot more non-creature free counter spells than there are creature free counter spells, right? Force of Will, Mindbreak Trap, Pact. Having another one of those is really, really good. And we have a lot of blue cards to pitch. We have Dramatic Reversal, Copy Artifact, Flesh Duplicate, Thrasios. We're fine pitching our Thrasios if we need to. Transmute Artifact, Imposter Mech, Fairy Mastermind. Like, we have all these cards that we can pitch to counter 2 drops. And Orcish Bowmasters often shuts down our whole plan, and then it gets cloned and cloned and cloned. Right, part of our game plan is cloning it, but still, it can totally set you into the Stone Age. So that's really good. Also, being able to counter 3 drops like a Ranger Captain of Eos or a Force of Negation, Fierce Guardianship, Flare of Duplication, Flare of Denial, Deflecting Swat. These are all also, this is really good backup, right? So being able to counter those is really crucial to back up your win attempt too. And so the goal of a lot of these counter spells is to be able to interact to stop opponents' wins and back up our own. And that's why having extra of these is great, right? You're going to run out of mana when you're pushing for a win attempt because win attempts cost a lot of mana. And so free counter spells
absolutely.
are good. Yep. And so back to the comparison, the other card that is like kind of the elephant in the room is Commandeer. This card, I think people are playing it a lot more now, but this card is, has a really big cost, both in mana value and in cards to pitch. You have to pitch 2 blue cards to cast it or pay 7 mana, which I've done a lot of both. And it gains control of target non-creature spell. And this is just a crazy powerful effect and goes to part of the plan of the deck, which is take a Ristic Study, copy Ristic Study, play Ristic Study. So you can, take an early draw engine, or once you already have your draw engine, it's just another counter spell, right? Again, once you've drawn half your deck, you have blue cards to pitch.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this card is the MVP of the cards I did not expect in changing lists to just shine like it does. Because in theory, you're like 2 blue cards. I don't know about that.
No way.
It's crazy. And then if you're sticking to the game plan of drawing cards, getting your draw engine down, you realize you quickly have 2 blue cards to pitch. And then I won a game a while ago because I went to a 4. I had a land, 2 blue cards, and a Commandeer, and I got a turn 1 Smothering Tithe from the 4th seat player. So
that is the dream.
Yeah,
done that only once, I think.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend doing that, but it was one of those hands where it was a 4, and I was like, "This is keepable."
Yep.
And it's only because I have this Commandeer.
An incredible card.
And
you'd be surprised how often, like when I added it to the deck, I didn't expect to have it in my mulligans with 2 blue cards as much as I saw it. And I realized that like a lot of our again, we have 41 blue cards in the deck, right? Yep. And so even Sink into Stupor and our Hydroelectric Specimen are lands that are blue cards. We have a lot of blue cards. So sometimes your mulligans just work out to have a Commandeer and a decent start. You're mulliganing for a good hand, and this can really make a hand better. Just taking someone's Ristic Study on turn 1 can just win you the game.
And with so many free counters that require us to pitch blue cards, it's almost never dead.
Yeah.
So if it's needed in the hand, it's almost always there to some degree.
Right.
So yeah, this card has been amazing.
Yeah. 100%. And a lot of the other things we're seeing here is just these clone effects. Max has added a couple of the Ristic clones. So he's added Mirror Maid and Clever Impersonator, but we're also on Copy Enchantment. And we're also on just creature clones, even in artifact clones. Clones are just really good. I like clones. I like playing your deck more than I like playing mine.
Yeah.
Turns out people play good cards in their deck. So I want to copy them.
And it's really easy sometimes to politic the fact that like, hey, this player already has what I'm copying.
Yes.
Why are you going to counter and keep me off of it as well?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the times that works. So, yeah, it's great to be able to use the board state to gain your advantage, because it's just like, hey, I'm playing what's already out there. Like, why are you going to interact with this? And
100%.
9 times out of 10, you win that argument.
100%. Yeah, because you like maybe you counter the first Ristic Study, although I don't personally, because I want it to be in place.
I want to copy those.
But maybe you do. But you shouldn't counter the second or the third or the fourth or the fifth, right? Like you can't, because
unless they're all ours.
Well, okay, that's a different story. But like if everyone is drawing cards, that interaction becomes more valuable because everyone's already going to be drawing tons of cards. If you just try to take one player out of the game, now you're just down interaction against the other two players who are still drawing cards, right?
Yep,
and so
absolutely.
Yeah, it's just a powerful strategy. It turns out it works. So ban Ristic Study, please. No.
Yep.
The other thing I'd say to point out, there's just a couple more like cards that are really interesting here. Dramatic Reversal, there's no Isochron Scepter. This is not a combo. This is just good. It turns out paying 2 mana to make, 7, 9, 15, whatever it is, it's good. It's really good.
It's fantastic. Yeah, this is Kennan's Ritual.
Yeah.
Is what it is. It is I have literally casted this spell and untapped and made 20 more mana to the game. And everyone else thought that I was nearing the end of what I was doing.
And we can look back to Enduring Vitality and see that when we have an Enduring Vitality in play, we have a lot of non-land permanents to untap if we just have a few creatures. So this card could be really good. And I think one of the really like powerful effects of a Dramatic Reversal is being able to tap down for a Ristic Study. Everyone goes for win. You're the most behind, so you only had 1 mana available. But as everyone's going for a win, you start drawing cards, and eventually you find an Elvish Spirit Guide and a Dramatic Reversal. And so that 1 mana now can enable you to win the game, right? Yep. That's crazy. Being able to win the game at instant speed with 1 land up, that's insane, right? But Dramatic Reversal enables that. So it's just, it's not always, sometimes you have it early and it just doesn't do what you need. But once you are developed, this card it's just one of the biggest rituals in the game.
Yep. Strongly agree.
Yep. So let's move on a little bit. I think let's go back to the overall game plan before we jump into more cards. And I think that we've talked a lot about how this deck is focused on drawing cards as much as possible. But I think one misconception with the list is that, even though we've added clones to more consistently find Ristic Study, and I guess to point that out is other lists don't need the clones as much because they have tutors.
Yep.
We don't have black in our deck or even white, like Enlightened Tutor. We don't but black tutors are the most, they're the best tutors, right? Yep. We don't have those. And so we can't tutor for Ristic Study other than, of course, Drift of Phantasms, which is there a lot of the time to tutor Ristic Study, right?
Yeah.
But that's a terrible tutor.
But it can also tutor up Basalt.
Right, of course.
So it's also a win as well. I think that's important to point out.
That is it wouldn't be in the list if it didn't do both, I think.
But, exactly.
But the point is that this makes our game plan more consistent to be able to clone these Ristic Studies, right? Oh, and the Clever Impersonator, which we briefly mentioned, it turns all of our creature tutors, like a Finale, a Nature's Rhythm, or an Invasion, into a Ristic Study for 6 mana. That's really important. But regardless, it's harder for us to get these Ristic Studies as early and as consistent, right? And so I think a misconception is, that you're always going to have one in play. You're just not, right? And so, so that's our first game plan, is to draw cards, but sometimes we just have to keep hands that have a different game plan. And so ranking the game plans of the deck, having a lot of mana is number 2. So Permanent mana, yes. So we don't sometimes having ritual mana like a Grim Monolith, a Mana Vault, or a Lotus Petal can be good, or Spirit Guide. Yeah. But really what we want to do is be able to just dump a ton of mana in play and then either draw into something that'll help us utilize that mana, or we can still spin Kinnan, right? Like we still have 25 creatures in the deck. We're not going to hit as consistently as Grind Them into Dust, the traditional Kinnan list. Yeah. We just don't have as many good hits, right? But we still do have hits. And the important thing is, once we have enough mana early, we are able to flip into, or we're able to draw into any spell and we can cast it, right? Like we can literally just often cast any spell in the deck. Like if we have enough mana that drawing a Nezahal, we can cast it on turn 2, I'm going to trust that I'm going to either flip or draw something, right? I'm going to have enough looks. And so I just want to point out that like you shouldn't always aggressively mull to the perfect hand that's Rhystic Study. Sometimes you have to keep just all mana hands if it's enough mana early enough. And then the third game plan is combo. Just because we want to draw cards and win the game that way later at flash speed with a billion cards in hand doesn't mean we have to. And the powerful part of this deck is being able to pivot. Sometimes you just draw a Basalt Win on turn 2 and no one expects it because they think, okay, I don't have to worry. They're going to cast Rhystic Study. Well, sometimes you don't cast Rhystic Study. Sometimes you cast Basalt Monolith and win.
So just really briefly for our newer players who like maybe haven't even tried Kinnan or seen it played before, what's our quickest ways to explain the combos in this deck? Just really quickly, the combo, the card, and then the outlet for it, because a lot of these are make infinite mana, and then you need an outlet. So maybe just explain those really quickly.
Absolutely.
I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on this because a lot of people probably have seen this, but
Yep.
just for our newer players.
Yeah, absolutely. So Kinnan, of course, says that our non-land permanents tap for an extra mana of the type that they produce, any one of the type that they produce, right? So Basalt Monolith is technically already an infinite combo with itself. It taps for 3 and untaps for 3. So you can do that infinite time. So when you have a Kinnan in play, now it taps for one more.
The game forever.
Well, no, then you'll get disqualified. Don't do that. Don't do that.
Don't take my advice. Don't take my advice.
But you can, with a Kinnan in play, all of a sudden it taps for an additional mana and still untaps for 3. So you can make infinite colorless. And we can look at Kinnan and be like, well, okay, that's not always useful because we still need to have colored mana to either cast our spells or activate Kinnan because it costs a green and a blue. Well, the easiest way to filter it is either going to be Mirage Mirror. And the way that Mirage Mirror makes infinite colored mana with Basalt Monolith is you are able to cast Mirage Mirror and then put infinite activations on the stack, targeting Basalt Monolith and any mana producing permanent that makes blue or green, right? Yeah. And so the idea here is we're going to stack these activations, and when you activate it, it just becomes a copy of target artifact, creature, enchantment, or land until end of turn, right?
Yep.
And so we'll target Basalt Monolith, hold priority, target, we'll say Tropical Island, hold priority, target Basalt Monolith, hold priority, target Tropical Island, and we'll do that infinite times. And once you've put infinite activations on the stack, you'll start letting them resolve, right? So we'll say it becomes a Tropical Island, and then we'll tap it for blue. And then we'll let the next activation resolve. It'll become a Basalt Monolith, and then we can pay 3 because we already have infinite colorless mana to untap Mirage Mirror. Yep. Great, now it's untapped, but it's a Basalt Monolith, taps for colorless. Okay, well, we'll just let the next activation resolve. It'll become a Tropical Island. We'll tap it for green and repeat. And then we're able to make infinite of any color of mana, and we're able to activate Kinnan to get any number of creatures into play from our deck. Yep. Non-human, of course. And I think our only human is Trophy Mage, so be warned. Yeah. But Thrasios is our best outlet, right? It just uses 4 colorless mana to scry 1, then reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land, put it on the battlefield tapped, otherwise draw a card. So we're basically able to, we are able to draw our whole deck and win the game. The other way to make infinite colored mana is just with our Treasure Vault. There it is, with our Treasure Vault. And we can spend infinite colorless mana into X to make infinite treasure tokens and do the same thing with Kinnan to get our Thrasios into play.
And very importantly, this is an artifact.
It is an artifact. So you can tutor it.
You can tutor it up.
Yes. So you can tutor it with a crop rotation, which is nice. That crop rotation is an outlet for infinite colorless mana. You could tutor it with any of your artifact tutors, right?
I'm still on Fabricate, so Fabricate goes and gets it.
Correct. Yep.
So that just allows you to go search for any artifact in your deck, put it into your hand.
Yep.
So.
And once you've drawn your deck, if you're at sorcery speed pre-combat, you can then cast a Finale of Devastation, which is great because it gives all your creatures +X and haste, right? Yep. And then you could just swing at your opponents because you put a ton of creatures into play, and you can use, of course, Tidespot Tyrant or Hullbreaker Horror to bounce their all their creatures and blockers to their hand, and just kill them with combat damage.
Yep.
If you are not pre-combat, you're instant speed or second main phase for whatever reason, you can still win the game. The way that you win is with Fairy Mastermind. So the way that this combo works is you're basically going to draw all of your opponents out and force them to draw from an empty library. So you may realize that this makes them draw all of their cards. So it can be dangerous if you don't set it up properly, but this is a safe way to win the game. And so the explanation here is before you ever activate Fairy Mastermind to force anyone to draw a card, you're going to want to set yourself up for success. And the way you do that is the easiest way is to get a Tidespot Tyrant into play and a Hullbreaker Horror into play. And quickly, I'll explain how this combo works as well. Either of these, like we said, we can bounce a Mox Amber and a Mox Opal or any of these non-land permanents that make mana, and we can go infinite. So we can make infinite colored mana this way, right?
And importantly, I think a lot of new players, whenever they start playing Kinnan, they don't realize that sometimes they'll have like a Simic Signet. And so they don't immediately, they'll have a Soul Ring, a Mana Vault, and then a Simic Signet, and not understand that once you have infinite mana with the 2 colorless rocks, you can start bouncing your colored rocks in order to make colored mana.
To filter.
Filter that way. And so even though it might not work at first, you will get there. Just make infinite colorless mana and then start bouncing the other rocks because the tax pays for itself.
Exactly. And when you have a Tidespout and a Hullbreaker, you are able to now bounce all of their permanents back to their hand. And that's the important part here with Fairy Mastermind is basically we want to get rid of their entire board states, even their lands, because Tidespot Tyrant can target lands, right?
Yep.
So we're going to bounce. They should have nothing on their board, and they might float mana. We don't want to let them cast any spells other than free spells or, with spirit guides, right? And so all you got to do is move to the next phase. It could be your end step. It doesn't matter because you can have a High Fae Trickster in play. Again, once you have all your creatures in play, you have everything, a Valley Flood Caller, whatever. So you're going to have these in play, and then you just start a loop again to make infinite colored mana, right? So that can just be, again, with a Hullbreaker Horror or Tidespot Tyrant. That's the easiest way. Whatever. Just make sure you have infinite of every color again once you've moved phases, and then their mana is cleared. Once you've done that, now you can just start setting up to basically be unbeatable. And the easiest way to do that is just cast a Veil of Summer. Now all your spells are uncounterable, and the hexproof part doesn't matter as much, but they can't counter your spells. So basically only a, Commandeer, a Deflecting Swat, a Mindbreak Trap, that's the big one, can interact with you. There's not really much that can do anything. And so what you're going to be doing is you're going to be now looping Endurance with the Hullbreaker Horror or Tidespot Tyrant to refill your deck.
Yep.
And that's the interaction point. You can always activate Fairy Mastermind on top of anything they do. So, as you're drawing them cards, they'll have spells to cast. If they ever try to, remove your Fairy Mastermind, just activate it again. It doesn't really matter. But Endurance, they can counter with a Mindbreak Trap, right? And so what I like to do is I just put an Endurance into play, and then I clone it with a Phyrexian Metamorph, and I make it a artifact creature. And then I'll just use a copy artifact to clone Phyrexian Metamorph to make it an artifact enchantment creature. And the only reason this is nice is because it allows you to use copy enchantment and Mirror Maid as well as all your other clones to copy Endurance. And you might ask, why does that matter? Well, the reason it matters is we can now respond to any counterspell on a clone of Endurance with another clone of Endurance because we have infinite mana and we have flash speed. And then we can respond with another one if they try to counter that. And so that allows us to basically add counterspells to our deck on that interaction point, so they can never actually, they can't stop us. They just don't have enough. There's not enough counterspells that they can use once we've resolved a Veil of Summer, right?
Yep. And their permanent's gone. Like there's only so much interaction they're gonna have.
Yep. And then once you've beaten any interaction they have, you can just keep activating Fairy Mastermind while looping your graveyard and refilling your library to draw them out and win the game.
Yep. So our 2 win cons then are Fairy Mastermind Endurance, which is able to be done in anyone's turn.
Yes, and it beats 1 ring protection.
Yep, and it beats 1 ring protection. And then the other one is during our turn, if it's in our first combat, Finale of Devastation is the easiest way to win. We just X is a billion. Yeah. We give all of our creatures.
Just kill them the old-fashioned way, kind of.
And it's game over.
Absolutely. Yeah, and so that's the core of the deck. That's what, all Kinnan lists are trying to do for the most part. So, okay, now I think let's talk a little bit about the interaction suite here one more time. And so we've gone over some of these individual cards, but I think really a big takeaway here is that we are just running a lot of interaction, right? This list is running quite a lot, and a lot of it is free. And so we're really able to interact very well on the stack. So we have technically 15 pieces of on the stack interaction, basically, spells that will interact with spells on the stack, or abilities in the stack, whatever. We don't really want to count Hydroelectric Specimen and Sink into Stupor as much because they're not going to interact as well, and they cost 3 mana. These are our worst interaction pieces. Technically, they're still part of it, but the core of our interaction suite is still 13 pieces of interaction, and we only have 4 counter spells that cost mana as their primary use, right? Of course, we can cast any of these spells for mana, but Dispel, Flusterstorm, Swansong, Veil, and that's a much higher ratio of free interaction than other decks. So we're able to interact really, really well.
Yep, and all the blue cards allow us to run all this extra interaction because we don't run silence effects.
Yep.
We don't get the advantage of
because they're not good in our colors.
We
don't want to cast a Dosin with the board.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. Cast Dosin of somebody else silences on top is not ever
not good. Then you lose.
We lose the game to that. Yeah. So just being able to outvalue these Grand Abolisher effects with all these interactions to just beat the stack is absolutely how the stack wins.
Absolutely. And so that also brings up maybe a little bit of a weakness of the deck. And the weakness of the deck is in these colors, we don't have the best interaction for permanence.
No.
Battlefield interaction is what I like to call it. So we have technically 9 pieces, but there's also an asterisk here. Hullbreaker Horror, Tidespot Tyrant, and Sink into Stupor are counted.
Yep.
Those can count, but you're not really going to be able to you can't flash into Tidespot very easily.
No.
Sometimes you hit it off Kinnan, and then maybe can remove something, but we're not really able to interact at instant speed with these as well. And we don't always want to spend 3 mana because, again, mana efficiency is everything in a big game, a Ristic game. So we really have about 6 pieces of interaction, and only 2 of them, 3 of them are permanent removal. Beseiju, Pongify, and Downpour. Well, Downpour's not even technically permanent removal.
Yeah.
They can bounce it, but it's good removal. So some of our weaknesses are going to be fighting against games that are, dominated by creature combo decks like a Magda, a Sisay. It's just hard for us to interact with them as meaningfully.
Absolutely.
Compared to a deck like Blue Farm where they just run, a Toxic Deluge or Swords to Plowshares.
And we can't tutor these effects out very easily either. So we're hoping with a Ristic plan, we just draw into these. I think you already mentioned you can drift into the Amphibian Downpour, but you still have to wait until your turn. You can't do it in a Ristic battle on the stack as you could with like a Vamp Tutor. We really do. I have sat down in a Magnus Sisay pod and just been like, oh no, this is going to be a rough one because it definitely struggles with those types of matches.
Absolutely. And just to clarify, Drift of Phantasms, you can transmute it for any 3-drop at sorcery speed. So sometimes you can just transmute to get that board wipe, which is really nice. That's why this card is really great in the deck.
Yep. So we talked about the weaknesses of the deck. What are the good matchups against this deck? So why would you want to play this deck in the meta right now?
I would say the good matchups for this deck are any mid-range blue deck, pretty much. And so Blue Farm. Yes, Blue Farm, Kinnan decks, sometimes traditional Kinnan decks, if they have a Ristic Study in play, we're going to be able to beat that. TNT, Rogthras is kind of hit or miss. Sometimes we can out combo them, but they can definitely do the creature game plan under the Ristic Study, so that's not as much. But Tivit, all those decks, any deck that wants to put a Ristic into play, we're built to beat it.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely.
Which is a lot of the meta right now.
Yeah. A lot of those tables, you sit down and turn 3, everyone's got a Ristic. So, yep. And that feels good with this deck. You have a lot of ability to draw cards and respond and have mana to do so.
Yep. We can interact. We're an interactive deck, which is that's how I like to play Magic. It's a fun way. I want to have agency in a game. And that's
why I switched to this deck list. Is just because I was being successful on the other list, and then I switched to this one, and I was like, this is just pedal to the metal.
Yeah.
If you're gonna draw 3 cards, so am I, and I'm gonna outpace you, and I really like that.
Yeah.
So,
and it's pedal to the metal, not in a turbo way.
No, not at all.
Pedal to the metal. Let's draw our deck.
Yeah, okay,
that's what we're trying to do.
Consphinx conundrum.
Make mana, draw deck.
It's just like, okay, you're gonna draw cards. I'm gonna draw cards. Like
together.
I didn't draw my Ristic, but I drew a Mirror Maid. Here's another Ristic.
Another one.
Yep. And so that feels really good to have all of the resources and then the mana.
Yes,
to be able to outpace those decks.
Totally. Yeah. And so looking at a couple of these other ratios, we can see that we have a couple more pieces of ramp than a lot of other decks. We have that extra copy artifact. We have Dramatic Reversal. We have the, although it's not even in here in this section, Mockingbird, you just often on turn 1 or 2 spend 1 mana to copy a Mana Dork, and that's even powerful on its own. So and Kinnan, of course, is just really good at making mana in the first place. So we just have a ton of mana in the deck. We have so much. We even have, of course, Crop Rotation for Gaia's Cradle. We have a ton of mana. And so, even without Kinnan, this deck functions pretty well with the Ristic plan. And actually, that's a really important point. I think that this list, sometimes your Kinnan gets killed because there's a Orcish Bowmasters, or they wanted to Swords it. And, you have a lot of heat because maybe you have a Ristic Study and they don't want you to have extra mana, which makes sense. And we don't need to cast Kinnan. And sometimes I think what people get stuck on is, I need my commander to function. Honestly, that's a great strength of this list, is that someone drops a Curse Totem, or they drop a Grafdigger's Cage, or they wipe the board. we are not out of it. As much as traditional Kinnan or a deck like Rogthras, we still have just mana rocks for days. We can just still cast spells, and our deck is built to function without Kinnan. And eventually we might want to cast Kinnan to win the game, or cast Kinnan as a ramp spell once we have a ton of, mana in play that it will double. But we don't need Kinnan to function. And that's really crucial to how this list functions.
Yep, absolutely.
And so just quickly, I think like we can look at our tutor suite. A lot of our tutors are focused on just getting creatures out. But of course, we have Transmute Artifact, Tezzeret the Seeker, Trophy Mage as our dedicated, I don't want to say dedicated win con tutors, but that's what their primary use is, right?
Yeah.
We want to get Basalt with them. Of course, Transmute Artifact and Tezzeret can get a Imposter Mech or a One Ring to draw cards, right? Yep. Or a clone, another clone with a Phyrexian Metamorph. So, these are still versatile, less than our creature tutors, but still good. Trophy Mage is mostly just to get, pretty much just to get Basalt, right?
Yep.
It gets Mirage Mirror too, so that's nice that it gets both halves of the combo, but this is just a win the game tutor, which we still want to have a mass of, again, so we can pivot, right? Once we find our window to win the game, we want to win the game.
Yep, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, and so I guess I'm running Fabricate over Mirror, over Trophy Mage. I'm running it because I think that Fabricate gives more flexibility in that game plan, but you're running Trophy Mage because it's harder to counter.
Well, I'm actually running Trophy Mage not because it's harder to counter, because they're going to be able to counter the Basalt monolith basically as well.
Sure.
It's just because Nature's Rhythm, Finale of Devastation, and Court of Calling now can tutor for Basalt monolith in a roundabout way. That's basically it. Yeah. And so... and notably, not Invasion of Ikoria, because it gets non-humans and Trophy Mage is a human.
Yeah, don't forget that.
Yes, don't forget that. Definitely. But yeah, these tutors are, I just, it doesn't come up often, honestly, rarely, but there's been moments where I wanted to I could just win the game, and a Hullbreaker Horror doesn't quite do it because I just already have everything else, but I don't have spells in hand, and I just need to get a Basalt Monolith, and I just can't with a creature tutor. So I've come back to Trophy Mage. I cut it for a long time.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And then... we don't need to go over everything with the tutors. I think the only thing to say here is that Nature's Rhythm has been a standout card and the best printing in Kinnan for a while. When Mistrise Village was printed, everyone was talking about that. Honestly, I cut it after not too long. It just comes into play tap too much. It looks scary, but Nature's Rhythm is an insane upgrade for the deck. The double tutor can win the game so easily. The Harmonize is so powerful, especially when you have a bunch of big creatures.
Yeah,
it's insane. We just cast it from the graveyard again, and just unless they exile with like a Force Negation or Mindbreak Trap, it's coming back.
Yeah,
and
we're gonna do it next turn.
Yeah, it's so good. It's incredible. Even just getting an Enduring Vitality with this as your ramp spell, and then the next turn using it as your payoff, even if it's a Seedborn, which I'll say Seedborn in this list is really sketchy, and Seedborn in general, it just is really like. A lot of times what happens is one person has removal, right? And so if you dodge the removal, no one has it.
Yeah.
You're off to the races. Yep. You're having a great time. But once one person has removal, and they will remove it, it's hard to back it up, because all of a sudden, once you use one counterspell on it, all the counterspells are unlocked, right? It's harder to counter the Seedborn. Well, unless they're counting like, a creature tutor for it. But when the Seedborn's on the stack, it's a creature, it's harder to counter. But once they use removal, it's easy to back up removal.
Sure. Yep. Makes sense.
So from here, I think maybe the next place to go is talk about some of these weird outliers in the deck. And I think we've talked about a good bit of them, but I think, some of the weird ones, let's talk about Copy Artifact for a second. I think a lot of people look at this card as another clone like the other clones, when it doesn't function that way. This is like primarily another Arcane Signet is the way I'm looking at this card, or Soul Ring. Whatever. You don't know exactly what your opponent's going to have, but I'm using this as just like another talisman effect, right? I want to be able to, really powerful game plan in Kinnan is going Mana Dork on 1. You tap 1 green for Llanowar Elves, for example. Next turn, you cast Kinnan with the Mana Dork untapped with your 2 lands, and then you can cast a talisman into an Arcane Signet, into a Felwar Stone, into a Copy Artifact. Usually you don't have that many, but you get the idea. They go neutral on mana. Yep. And that's really powerful. So Copy Artifact is mainly seen as a mana rock first, but it has the upside of being a 2-mana 1 ring, which is crazy, or a Wishclaw Talisman, or sometimes a Bolus the Citadel. Oh, those are the games.
Yeah, absolutely. And so like the card, whenever you're expecting to play it as an Arcane Signet, so like the floor is so high in terms of I'm already going to be using this to copy my artifacts. And then somebody drops a Wishclaw, and it's like, okay, my entire game plan with this has changed. I've unlocked a different way to put myself in a better position.
So good.
So yeah, this is definitely such a good card to
Yeah.
run, and also focus on imposter mechs or Phyrexian metamorphs. Just remember that those are also artifacts in play,
Mhm.
even though imposter mech's not a creature, because a copy of the creature without being one, but you can still get value with that copy artifact. And then a One Ring's a no-brainer. I mean, I've had somebody play a One Ring, and then you have a 2-mana One Ring. It's just so good.
Yeah.
So the floor
It's
is
insane.
so high on this card that it's like it's almost always going to have good value.
Yeah. And of course, the downside is just that it costs a blue mana, right?
Yep.
So compared to an Arcane Signet, we can't cast it off a mana wall. We
Yeah.
have to use a blue mana, which can come up for sure. One more thing quickly, Imposter Mech is also just very, very good in this list. For a long time, I think people weren't running it because you can't flip into it, and we want to run creatures because we want to flip into it. Who cares? This card is great. The main reason that I think it's insane right now in the meta is that it copies Orcish Bowmaster, it kills the Bowmaster, and then they cannot use a clone to kill this one.
Yep.
It's not a creature, so it doesn't die to damage.
Yeah, because Bowmaster, I guess the weakness also of the deck would be an individual card. Bowmaster hurts the deck a bit. Our plan is to draw cards, and then a lot of our creatures aren't these massive 7/7 toughness. And so yeah, being able to just quickly copy the Bowmaster, kill it, and then we have an untargetable, essentially. If somebody else clones a Bowmaster, ours can't be targeted.
Well, and it's hard to even clone it. Like they have to have their own, artifact clone.
Exactly. And so it's very hard to get rid of.
Which is very hard.
And so, yeah, it definitely helps pivot the game back into our favor when something like a Bowmaster is played. It goes against our game plan strongly.
Yeah. And quick side note, another recent addition to the deck was Flesh Duplicate. And the reason for this is, even though, of course, Imposter Mech is the best answer to Bowmaster and is a 2-drop, it can't be tutored with our creature tutors.
Correct.
And what I found myself doing a lot was spending 4 mana to get a Phyrexian Metamorph or Clever Impersonator to copy a Bowmaster. But having a 2-drop clone in the deck allows us to spend only 4 mana with a Finale or Nature's Rhythm or a Invasion to get a clone of Bowmaster to deal with it. And clones of Bowmaster is one of the best ways to deal with Bowmaster, right? Again, we have limited removal, but we have a lot of clones.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's great. Oh, and then the other note with Imposter Mech is because it's not a creature, it doesn't have Summoning Sickness.
Yeah.
And so a really common play pattern is using this very similarly to a copy artifact, just using it like a mana rock. Just cast it and copy a Birds of Paradise, and you have another Arcane Signet. That's great. There's no issue there, right? This is just a very versatile card.
Yeah.
So quickly, we wanted to talk about a couple of the changes that Jonah is running different from my list.
Yep.
And, there's definitely other ways you can go that still fit the same game plan. So yeah, why are you running these cards?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm just testing these right now. I've had a lot of success with your list. And so the Disrupting Shoal, I switched for Spellskite just because I wanted to try a lot of Orcish Bowmaster interactions. I just wanted to see, bring it back and see if I could kind of prevent some of the damage while I draw cards, because it essentially gives you up to 4 cards that you can draw in a turn. And we wanted to be drawing a lot of cards. Wandering Archaic was just, I wanted to have one more like critical flip in there. For my opinion, it's still somebody has to pay 2 for you not to copy whatever they're doing. And a lot of other decks don't have extra mana. I've played this card and just gotten crazy value from it, where somebody's crop rotting, they don't want to pay 2 mana for me not to crop rot, or they're doing a demonic trigger, and I can convince them not to pay because I'm gonna go get X, Y, or Z, and Enduring Vitality. It's a really good card, and also it's also protection in some of these counter wars where I can flip into it, and then at that point they can't really counter anything because they have to have 2 mana every time, or else I copy it, and then their counter spell's just ineffective.
Yeah, if you flip into this in a counter war, is again in a big game, Aristic game, you just win the game.
Exactly.
Because they don't have enough mana to pay.
Yeah, they can't outvalue
almost all
of your interaction. And then the Fabricate, we already talked about slightly with the Trophy Mage, was just that I didn't want to come off of some of the artifact counters that I had, such as Imposter Mech, my Treasure Vault, those types of things that I liked having the access to.
Yeah, because Trophy Mage only gets the win.
Correct. Yep. And then Astral Dragon instead of the Flesh Duplicate, just because I wanted another big flip. This card is 8 mana. It's a lot, so it's almost always needing to be flipped into. But also I found myself in situations where I'm tapping out for this. And if you copy 3 Rhystic Studies, because they're non-creature permanents. So I have done it where I've copied 2 Rhystic Studies and a Smothering Tithe.
2 Smothering Tithes.
Or 2 Smothering Tithes and a Rhystic Study, and like all of these other, non-creature copies that this essentially just wins you the game. Very heavily. And so it's also very fun to flip this out. So
Oh my God. It's such a rush.
it's a game changer because it definitely no pun intended, but yeah, I mean, you flip into this and it hits the board and everybody it just starts panicking and looking around at what you have to copy, and that's kind of fun. So misdirection, I still like. I might go back to that. It was a very successful card, but yeah, it's just one of those that I just took it out in the meantime to test these changes.
Yeah, and I've been on all these cards in the past. Yeah, and the last thing, of course, is just that Manamo is a powerful land in certain situations,
Yep.
and I just want to have all the
It's
dual
my
lands I
baby.
can.
Yep.
Yeah, I just want dual lands. That's the only reason.
Evan doesn't want to not be able to fetch for for all of his colors, and
Yep.
I'm like, oh, it still pays for a fish on turn one, so it's a keepable.
It does. It does do that.
And so yeah, that's the only thing is I haven't gotten on the Wooded Foothills train yet. So
And that's like, you know, and I think that's a big thing is like, obviously, brewers are always trying to optimize.
Yep.
Optimize. That's important. But at the end of the day, it's like the list functions very similarly. And like, you should build your lists to your own play style.
absolutely,
Yeah. The cards that work well for you, put them in your deck.
yeah. I'm just not a fan of Trophy Mage, so I don't run it. And even though you're more successful with your,
too.
even though you're more successful with your list,
But
it's not for me. So it's going to reduce my success.
Yep.
And so you got to definitely think about that when you're brewing your Kinnan deck differently. I'm still 5 cards different than Evan. It's just do it to your playstyle.
Yes.
So you want to move on to some mulligans?
Yeah, so we're not going to do a whole big mulligan section. What we really want to do is just show a couple of hands that are going to be good, mediocre, and bad. Just give an idea of what you can keep.
So what are we looking at here, Evan?
So this is what I would consider a good hand. It's not an amazing hand, though, even though it looks like it on face value. This hand is, of course, very powerful. We have a Soul Ring, which is just one of the best cards in Commander. This hand is going to allow us to cast a Kinnan on turn 1. We can play a land into Soul Ring, Felwar Stone, Elvish Spirit Guide, Kinnan. That's amazing. We're going to be able to untap on turn 2 with 2 lands, Felwar Stone, a Soul Ring, cast a Seedborn Muse, and then we're flipping Kinnan every turn.
Yep.
That's great, right? The trap about this hand is, and the reason I think it's a keep is because we have the mana, and it's actually not about the Seedborn, even though I think like the Seedborn is the bait, right, of a lot of these hands. The Seedborn, I would imagine the Seedborn just gets killed immediately.
Yeah, I've been blown out to this exact hand in a tournament.
It doesn't have any backup. Even if you do, it's like we talked about earlier. Once they have one removal spell, all the counter spells are turned on to protect the removal spell. It's happened to me so many times. So I wouldn't expect the Seedborn to work, but I'm still keeping it because it's a turn 2 Seedborn, right?
Absolutely.
But the reason I think a hand like this is definitely keepable is you have so much mana so early. 7 mana on turn 2, permanent mana, is really, really strong. And it makes any top deck castable, right? The only thing we couldn't cast on turn 2 in the deck is a Tidespot Tyrant. That's it.
Or Nyx Bloom.
Nyx Bloom 7.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So we could cast everything in the deck except
much stuff in the deck.
Yeah, come on, John. No, I'm just kidding. But like, you know, there's definitely going to be times where they blow out your Seedborn and then you're on flip every turn and you just draw lands or counter spells or whatever. Like, you know, that's not great. But I think the explosive potential of this hand, especially with the Seedborn, makes it keepable. I think what would make this hand better is if that Seedborn was just a creature tutor, because I would most of the time rather just tutor a clever impersonator into play, copy heuristic study, and draw cards, and then I have mana. Yep. Right. So, you know, not a perfect hand, but I do think this is a good hand. This is really where we're talking. We want the draw engine, but if we see a hand like this, can't really pitch it. It's still good. Like I'm gonna keep this. I'm not gonna mull a good game plan with a lot of mana for the perfect hand, which would even just be a Mystic Remora.
Yep.
Right.
But the important part is that this is permanent mana. And I think a lot of people get trapped with this being a mana vault into a Lotus Petal and then they have all this mana and
one Kinnan flip and then you pass.
And then
and then you lose
one Kinnan flip, you have nothing.
Yeah.
And unless you absolutely
or they blow up your Kinnan even and
unless you absolutely have to just keep a hand like that, you're at 4 or something. Yeah, the permanent mana part is very important to recognize in these mulligans of does this mana stick around? And if I draw something, can I cast something?
And I think the last thing I'll say is just make sure you're actually playing out these hands in your head before you decide to keep, right? Mm-hmm. Look at what you're doing on turn 1, right? We're understanding, we see that we can play a land, Soul Ring, into a Felwar Stone, Spirit Guide, Kinnan, and then turn 2, we have this mana. Do that in your head. Actually look at what you're going to be doing, because I see a lot of people like see, oh, cool, I have a bunch of mana. And then what ends up being is they can't cast Kinnan on turn 1. And then it's just a bunch of 2 mana rocks. And if you're basically getting mana online turn 3 and then turn 4, you're doing something because you didn't play it out in your head and, you know, you're just casting a mana rock on turn 2 and passing. That's the trap,
Yep.
right? Play it out in your head. Make sure you have a game plan online early and that you're doing something significant at least by turn 2. And really able to impact, like, you know, at least ramping a ton by turn 2, maybe able to impact the game a lot by turn 3. If it's slower than that, don't keep it.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, Jonah, what do you think about this hand?
This is a rough hand. I think this is a trap hand that a lot of newer Kinnan players fall into. So looking at this hand, you're going to go turn 1 Elvish Mystic into play the second land, turn 2 Kinnan, tap, play the Delighted Halfling. So then moving into turn 3, the plan is the Seedborn. However, if we don't get a land, we're playing a Seedborn with only 6 mana up, which is not enough to flip Kinnan. So the idea of spend Kinnan every turn, we're really depending on a land draw. And without that, this hand is just very bad. And it makes us the threat for no reason.
Yeah.
And so a lot of those, you know, that focus. Also, if we do draw another land, then the Seedborn kind of needs to resolve in order for us to make this hand viable. The other thing too is on turn 4, even we do draw 2 more lands, and you know the Seedborn didn't resolve and we didn't flip a bunch. The Tide Spout's very risky because we have to tap out for the Tide Spout and then just hope that we have free rocks at that point. Like,
we're not
a lot going on. Yeah, there's just not a lot going on here.
And it's not like we can back it up.
And then tapping out for the next bloom on turn 4 is not going to be viable either.
I'd rather spin Kinnan at the end step. Or
Exactly. So yeah, this is one of those trap hands.
Just comparing it to the first hand we looked at.
Yep.
There's 2 other issues here. One is we are very much weaker to Orcish Bowmasters because all of our mana is in Dorks, right?
Yep.
And we're turned slower than the last hand. Not only do we have less mana on turn 3 than we did in the last hand. The last hand we had all our mana online turn 2, right?
Yep.
So this is just a lot slower. Honestly, like on a mold of 4, this is great.
Yeah,
right?
that's what I was gonna say. I'm before this hand might be good.
You just bottom Seedborn, Tidespot, and Nyxbloom.
Even like a turn,
but that's
the 5 if you're not playing against any other black.
Well, I mean,
in the pod, maybe
it's one of those things where this might work out. And honestly, I bet in a lot of games it would.
Yeah.
It's just that like you're going to be reliant on your top decks. It's still slower, and yeah, you have like some mana, but like there's a lot more that can go wrong in a hand like this than the one we
floor is so low.
And again,
hand.
Really all we want to be doing is drawing cards, and unless we have like an insane amount of mana like we did the last time, we just can't keep it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, definitely don't keep this hand. I guess before we move on, what would make this hand more keepable besides the draw engine? Obviously.
Oh man,
I knew everybody knows that's the game plan.
Study.
Yeah, Ristic Study for the Tide Spout. This hand is a dream. Like this is what we want. But yeah.
I mean, I still think like a creature tutor would be good. An Enduring Vitality. I mean, I know the Dorks don't work as well with it, but just like more mana would work. Or even a combo could work, right? Like if we have a turn 3 combo win, it's not what we want to do, but like
I was even thinking if one of these lands was like a Cradle.
True.
Makes this hand a lot more.
Yeah, more mana. Yeah, agreed.
More mana.
Totally. 100%.
All right, let's move on and look at another hand.
And now we pause while I look for a hand.
So Evan, what are we looking at with this hand?
So this is definitely another trap hand. I would say another thing that a lot of people do in Mulligans in any deck is they see the other decks in the pod and they mull to interact with them.
Yep.
You do need to interact, and we run a ton of interaction, right? Like, so yeah, you might imagine like, okay, well, we want to see it in our openers. Well, while we want to see it in our openers, it can't be our game plan.
Yeah,
we are not going to be able to stop all 3 decks with interaction almost all of the time. So what we really need to be doing is mulling for an actual game plan outside of interaction, and interaction makes the hand better, or we draw it later.
Okay.
And so a hand like this is just like, you know, it looks nice. We have the Elvish Spirit Guide, we have the Talisman, we have the Copy Artifact and a land. But like, let's look how this hand plays out. Turn 1, we fetch for a Tropical Island, Elvish Spirit Guide, cast a Talisman, pass.
Yep.
Turn 2, we could play Kinnan and nothing, or we could copy the Talisman and then pass. And then even if we get Kinnan in the next turn, it just doesn't do that much, right?
Yeah.
We're just not really doing anything. The only out to this hand, of course, is Commandeer. We have Commandeer with backup.
Yep.
Right? Which is nice. So we could steal Ristic Study, and that's the only saving grace of this hand. But you really, like, unless I have a little bit better of a plan, I don't really want to keep that. I don't think this hand's unkeepable, right? I think it's possible to keep, but like, you shouldn't be keeping it to interact with your opponents. The reason you might keep this hand is you think that you're going to be able to commandeer something early that's a draw engine, a Smothering Tide, something like that. And that's a big gamble. It could pay off, but it's a big gamble.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think we talked about it slightly while we were finding this hand. And yeah, was just thinking that like this might be keepable against like a Vivi or a Rogsai or something very fast. And then after talking about it, yeah, this is a trap for sure.
Yeah.
This is one of those things where it's high risk, high reward. But there's really not a lot to reward off of those decks even,
Right.
because you're stopping one and losing to the other.
And yeah, like Rogsai, I'd say is probably the hand that I would, or like the deck I would keep this against the most. But even then again, it's so sketchy.
Yeah.
But just because they have still the Mystic game plan, although just to note, commandeering a Mystic Remora early doesn't usually work out because you like don't have the mana to pay for it if they're above you in turn order.
Exactly.
And like on turn 1. And then, but you know, Rogsai of course has more payoffs, but still, this isn't the hand you should be looking for. Triple piece of interaction. You should be looking for a game plan with interaction to back it up.
But I think that's it. We're going to wrap this up. And thank you so much for coming on here and talking about a deck that you've had a lot of success with. And so, yeah, we look forward to having you on next time. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Yeah.
Comment down in the video if you agree or disagree with any of the things that we talked about here or anything that we might have missed that you've run in your Kinnan decks. So we'd love to hear about it. So, yeah, thank you.